All right, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Tavern Voices. I'm your host, Kevin King, and with me, as always, is the radio legend himself, Tyler Crawley, broadcasting all the way from the coast of North Carolina, the Outer Banks, which is, have you watched it on Netflix yet?
I've seen 4 episodes.
It doesn't get better.
But tell me what's so funny is they wanted to film it in Wilmington, and like how obvious is that by watching the show? Like they got Figure Eight, they got Masonboro, like they were going to set it in Outer Banks, which I understand, right? Because Outer Banks has more of a name that would sell better, but it's clear they wanted to use landmarks from Wilmington, and it sucks they couldn't film here, but it's pretty obvious they wanted to do that.
So I didn't watch the first half. I caught like the last maybe 4 episodes, and so I thought that was hilarious watching it and picking up on all the little things they try to drop in there.
Yeah.
But did you notice? Well, you haven't gotten there yet. Wait till the end. There's a WECT truck in one of the scenes when the news there. They're like, they're trying so hard to be in Wilmington. They keep dropping all of these names, like you said. They jump back and forth between Outer Banks, Wilmington, and then there's a couple times they make these references to like, we're just going to take the boat down to Mexico, or let's pop into Cuba. And I'm like, do they know where North Carolina is? They're like, yeah, it'll take you a couple days, and you'll be in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yeah, I will say that's the funniest thing just about Outer Banks in general is like people think it's near us that don't know about North Carolina. Like I've had friends go to Outer Banks and they're like, "Hey man, we're in the Outer Banks. You should come by." I'm like, "That's like 6 hours."
Yeah,
and I'm like, you actually were closer in DC than you are now in the Outer Banks. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make that, but. It's funny watching that show. Too bad, HB2 and politics had to ruin that from being filmed here. But speaking of film, did you see what movies just got greenlit? It's going to be filmed here in Wilmington.
I have not seen that.
Scream 5 is going to be filming here in Wilmington. And for everyone that knows me, I'm a huge Scream fan. And so I'm pretty pumped that they're going to be. I hate film incentives. I will fight them to the death. But I still think it's kind of cool that Scream 5 is going to be filming here in Wilmington. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, that's right up your alley. Are you going to be an extra?
Maybe? I'm working on it. I'm pulling all my connections to see if I can make it in the show. I'd love to get like killed. Like, wouldn't that be cool if there's like a big death scene and I got to like get killed or something? I'd be all for that.
That'd be awesome. You should be killed in the radio studio. I can see the scene now that like the reflection in the glass, you see the mask right as you get like from behind.
Yeah, like the crescendo of my show, like all of a sudden then he comes in and takes me out, and then he takes his mask off and it's Donald Trump, and I'm like, no, like that would be really good.
This is not Scooby-Doo.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, no, Scooby-Doo, he wouldn't get unmasked until he was caught. That would be the reveal for the audience to see what happens. But speaking of murder and Donald Trump, should we start by talking about Donald Trump, who is somehow now convinced that Joe Scarborough, his former BFF, maybe a murderer? I mean, this is like the funniest. I mean, it's funny and sad and horrible and just every adjective you can think of. But yeah, so Donald Trump the last couple of days has really been kind of caught on this idea that Joe Scarborough maybe murdered someone that worked for him back when he was a congressman. Of course, there's no evidence at all. But why do you think he's doing? Now, here's my question. This is my question for you. Why do you think he's doing this? Like, what does he benefit other than maybe making Joe squirm a little bit? But I just can't figure out like why he's stuck on this.
Because Trump has the media figured out, right? I mean, that's how he became president. He says stuff, gets people to talk about it. It's earned time. He doesn't have to pay for a dime in television advertising because every show is, and that's what he loves. If you stop talking about him, that's what drives him crazy. So he has to come up with something to drive that conversation. You saw last week, Mika was trying to get Twitter to shut down Trump's account. And so the more they bicker back and forth, it's going to drive ratings and it's going to keep Trump on MSNBC, obviously his favorite station now.
But the only thing, isn't that with anything though? I mean, we've seen this, right? Anytime Trump says
you're saying,
anything,
why did he pick this topic?
Yeah, like I'm saying is that like going after Twitter, like I want to talk about that in a second. But like, I mean, he's the president. Anything he says is going to get attention. Nobody watches Morning Joe outside of the Acela corridor. I don't see how it helps him. It's not like, the mail-in absentee thing that got the fact check and, like that, at least I think provides some sort of value because it makes his critics look kind of out of touch, right? When they're talking about like, oh, absentee ballot, everyone should be doing that, and voter ID stupid, and regular voters are like, no, I actually think that makes sense. But it's like when he's going back and forth with Joe Scarborough, I feel like everyone, like in the Rust Belt's like, who's Joe Scarborough? Like, what's Morning Joe? Like, they don't watch that show. They don't know what he's saying.
Yeah, nobody's paying attention to him in the Rust Belt on that though, right? I mean, that's what we get caught up in these like Twitter feuds and realize that no one is on Twitter except for the 12 people talking about it. And it's getting bigger than it is.
It is true.
It's an echo chamber. I feel like you've said this before, but they say like 89% of Twitter's posts are made by like 3% of people on the channel or something absurd. It's like you've got a few people, your big media personalities, Trump, a few celebrities and that.
Well, but that's
the majority of the content. And the average person probably doesn't even have an active Twitter anymore. But if they do, they're not engaged.
From my perspective, I think the stat is like, it's like 20% of Twitter creates 80% of the content, something along those lines. And I think that's true, but there are a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who have like secret Twitter accounts. Like they don't tweet anything. And I've noticed this with like some people that follow me. Like every once in a while, I'll just check out, see the people that are following me. And I'll realize that like, man, some of these people like they don't tweet. They just have the account. So they follow the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And then there are people that don't even have accounts that still follow what's happening on Twitter. So Twitter does have a reach, and it is true though, but it's only a small percentage of the people actually on there that are creating this. It's funny. I was actually talking about it this morning on my show, and I was saying, I remember when we signed up for Twitter?
Yeah, you told me what it was and made me sign up.
Do you remember who the first person we followed was?
Andrew Breitbart?
At least it was mine. Huh?
Was it Andrew Breitbart?
No, it was Julia Banderas of Fox. Remember Fox? Yeah. I was thinking about it. If you go there, you can still see who you scroll all the way down your list. You can see the first person you followed was, and mine's Julia Banderas. And I remember we were like talking about who we were going to follow and everything. Because I just remember it was such a fascinating thing, and you could actually interact with celebrities back then and people on Fox. And now it's just like a huge mess. There's no way. There's so many people on there. The traffic's insane. But it was fascinating. But I do think that a lot of people pay attention. I mean, I've had people tell me the only reason Donald Trump won was because of his Twitter account, and because that was his direct way of communicating with voters. And so once again, I'm not saying he shouldn't go on Twitter. I mean, it is one of his direct outlets, but it's just weird that he's like focusing on this thing that I don't see how it benefits him other than he's just really mad at Joe Scarborough.
Yeah.
And I don't see it hurting Joe. It helps Joe. It raises his profile, and it proves that he's making Trump mad. I mean, I think it helps Joe Scarborough more than it helps Trump.
I know. I'm sure it probably does. I don't think that there's really anything that Trump posts on Twitter that helps him. I think it's his outlet, is his way of saying anything he wants to without the media getting in between. And I think he uses that to his advantage. It's not in a press room where the general public is only going to see the clip they put on the nightly news. He can just say whatever he wants. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone said, hey, there's this rumor about Scarborough doing this or whatever. You could really get his goat by saying this. And he was like, game on. He's the guy that you dare to do something and he will do it and not even laugh in the middle of the practical joke. And I think that's what it is. He's like, how can I go after this person and just wreck them? Because I mean, he does it even off the cuff in the press briefing room. It wasn't that long ago he told that reporter, what was it, like a week or two ago, and he was like, yeah, you never think, or something like that.
Yeah, no, he does do that.
So,
but I think there's a value in Twitter. Like, I do think it's a way for him to communicate with his biggest supporters directly, and they're a fan of it. And to be honest with you, his latest tweet this morning that's got everyone up in arms, and I actually posted about this on Tavern Voices, is I said, in my previous years of, watching and talking and writing about Trump, I would have gone the normal path, which I would have seen this tweet. So Donald Trump tweeted, Republicans feel that social media platforms totally silence conservative voices. We will strongly regulate or close them down before we ever allow this to happen. So I read this, and normally I would have done exactly what I would have done in the past. A lot of other people are doing, which is, oh my gosh, Donald Trump's going to regulate Twitter. He can't do this. It's a private platform, and we get in this huge debate about, the First Amendment and everything else. And so I like took a breath and I realized and remember that every other time this happens, when I talk to my friends who are Trump supporters, and they'll always say like, but does he do anything? Like, why do I always get so mad when Trump tweets something and then never actually acts? And I thought that's 100% right. Like Trump does this all the time. He talked about how he wanted to, make libel laws more ambiguous so you could go after newspapers, or he was going to go after the FCC license of TV stations he didn't like. He never does it. And there's no way he's going after Twitter. There's no way. First of all, he loves Twitter, so he's not going to shut it down. He actually wouldn't care if every conservative got taken off except for him, as long as he has the outlet, which of course they're never going to take him off. And so to me, this is just virtue signaling. Very similar to, when Joe Biden does something like, went out, wear the mask, right? It doesn't really do much, but it shows like, hey, I'm with you. And so like him saying like, ooh, Twitter's bad and we're going to shut it down. And, his base goes cheers, his critics go crazy, and he gets like a twofer out of it. His base is happy and the people that don't like him go nuts. And that's exactly what he wants. But no, Trump's not going to shut down Twitter. He's not even going to try.
Well, I think it kind of ties back in what we were just talking about with Joe Scarborough, obviously, and that he uses this as an opportunity to just street fight in a way, right? I mean, never once, I don't think I've heard Trump talk about a policy ever. I mean, maybe I could think about verse. He's never debating like marginal tax rates or, or specifics on trade. He just makes generalizations. And the answer is, if you don't do a deal that's good for me, then I'm just going to, do something totally extreme, and totally pull, force American companies completely out of your country or something. He says those things. I think that's exactly what he does in these situations. Oh, if Twitter is going to start fact checking me, well, we'll just shut down Twitter. We'll go after you. So it shows that he's fighting. And I think his base likes that. I think a lot of people outside of his base kind of like that. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like politics. I mean, politician is as bad of a term as lawyer, probably worse now. People are probably like, don't grow up to be a politician, please be an attorney. As far as the cultural norm, and to have somebody up there who doesn't care about the politics. There's a lot of people who like him because he doesn't care. He will say whatever. And I think this is part of that. It's like, we learned that with Obama. Policies don't matter. If you look at substance between Romney and Obama or McCain and Obama, the policies and substance of the policies should have overwhelmingly elected both of them. But that's not what people cared about. They cared about platitudes. And now we just have the ultimate platitude himself.
I think it's a visceral sort of thing where I do think, you have the base, obviously, that pretty much Trump really can't do any wrong. And that's very similar to what you mentioned with Obama. Like, think about all the things Obama did, whether it was droning American citizens, whether it was bailing out Wall Street. I mean, these things that
spying on journalists.
Yeah, Republicans do. And, Trump does. And he's, Satan. But Obama did it. And they looked the other way because it's the cult of personality. But I do think you're right about there are a lot of people that don't pay attention to politics. And they don't like these. It's really funny because we've sort of moved into this place where people are like, I hate slick politicians. Now, the reason that slick politicians existed was because that's who people voted for. The people that were charismatic, the people that were, somewhat good looking. It's not hard to be good looking in politics, but if you're somewhat attractive and, you could talk, you had to speak and you could talk about certain policies and everything else, kind of like a Bill Clinton, right. That it was, oh, wow, I like that. But what's happened is that now people have railed against that. And so now all of a sudden, it's almost like the more uninformed. I mean, I don't mean to put it like that crudely, but like the sort of Sarah Palin where like, I'm not from Washington and I use, I have an accent and, I don't use the phrases that you hear in Washington and I'm folksy. And now all of a sudden it's like that sort of populist appeal. And so when Trump swears, when, he doesn't talk about policy, when he talks sort of generalities and, we're going to slam that person down, we're going to beat him up. I mean, people have always equated like his sort of politics with like wrestling, where it's all about like the walk in and it's not even actually necessarily about the wrestling match. Like it's more about like the hype that everyone has walking in. And it's, it's sort of a predetermined decision before you even actually end up deciding who's going to fight. And so that's where we are now. And so we're going to see a lot more of that. And I do think that it does appeal to people, but I do wonder if you can go too far. And that's the big question we always have with Trump, right? Like, did he go too far this time? Did he go too far? And some people have said that about this crazy thing with Joe Scarborough. Like, is this it? Will he finally get some backlash? And we've never seen it happen, and we may never see it happen, but you always wonder if there is a tipping point where it's like, okay, you know, I like that he makes fun of some of these people, but that was wrong. Well, or that was mean or whatever.
I think it'll go too far when the left stops going that far first, right? Yeah. I mean, Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer, right? That's the problem, and we've talked about that a bunch on the show. Is that they've done it first, so now there's nothing. I mean, even with the with the Tara Reade scandal with Biden, it's like, okay, well, once the left admits it, it's done. The pendulum is not going to be able to swing back. They're going to try, but no one's going to pay them any attention. Me Too had a run, and then they destroyed it. And then, and I think that's the issue is that, yeah, if he was the first person out here calling for a cold case murder investigation against a random, television host, then that might be seen as crazy to people, but they're used to these kinds of crazy allegations. I mean, when you had what's her name holding Trump's head cut off, as a joke.
Oh, Kathy Griffin,
and all the celebrities, your Alec Baldwins, all these people who just have to spew so much hate against it. I mean, they go too far first, and then the people that are in the base and even to the middle are like, well, yeah, I mean, shots were fired at him, he fired shots back. That's what all us red-blooded Americans do.
I will say this is the one thing that I'm always sort of confused about, and I think it was Jonah Goldberg recently wrote about this, which is so the Tara Reade thing. And Tara Reade thing is a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. Because he was arguing, so when Brett Kavanaugh was being falsely accused, which we look back on it, and I don't even know how liberals look back on that and think that anything that happened there was fair, or that, he should have been derailed, or his nomination should have been derailed because of that insanity, is that Republicans were like, this is the most horrible thing ever. I can't believe they're treating him this way. And that we need to live in a society that has fairness. And so then here we are, what is this, 2-3 years later, and now Joe Biden is being accused by someone who I think has no credibility whatsoever. I think she's lying. I think that Biden may have been inappropriate, maybe said something inappropriate, or maybe,
it's not like he's going to remember at this point.
Yeah, I know. I don't think he did what she said that he did. I mean, this story just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But now you have all these Republicans saying, well, Biden should be treated the same way as Kavanaugh. And Goldberg's point was sort of, well, so how do then conservatives react? So are we now going to say that everyone should be treated unfairly like Brett Kavanaugh? Or is this our opportunity to say, okay, let's treat Biden fairly and hope that the Democrats pick up on that? Because who's setting the standard? So if we're going to say, well, Democrats did it, so now we have to do it. So then we do it. And then the next time it happens, the Democrats do it because we did it. It's never going to end. So no one's going to be treated fairly. So how do we get back to fairness? And I don't know the answer to that question. But that's the problem that I run into is like, it's always like we demand fairness, but because our person was treated unfair last time, we demand that the Democrat now be treated unfair. And it's like, well, now no one's ever going to be treated fair again. It's like dominoes.
First of all, it's to bring him up twice. The hero, Andrew Breitbart, righteous indignation, right? Yeah. It's proving their point when the hypocrisy comes up. I think that's what we're at. I mean, Goldberg's point's right in an academic sense of, well, if we just keep tit for tatting the whole time, nothing's ever going to improve. And I think that's the case. But also, I think as individuals, like the human spirit, if you've watched, let's bring up The Last Dance, the other great binge-worthy episode or show that I've watched. And, the Pistons would clobber the Bulls. And so did the Bulls, to quote Michelle Obama, when they go low, do you go high? Everybody said, well, that's not fair. Blow the whistle. That's a foul. Call something. But then when the Bulls would deck them back and get even, people are kind of like, yeah, well, you did it first. That's fair. Because, and so if they had not done it, they would have been morally justified in being, taking the high road. But I think it's also human nature that, well, if you treated me like that, I'm going to throw my elbow back and we'll call it even. And maybe you'll learn that it sucks to have an elbow across your head, and then you won't do it next time. And we'll come to some sort of, common ground. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if you get there by showing them how bad it sucks to be treated that way, or if you try to take the high road yourself.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't know what the answer is, but it just feels like once we all go, okay, well, the Democrats are setting the standard of justice, that it's over. Like, because we're just going to continue to follow them into hell as they get worse and worse. And that's what worries me, is that at some point there's got to be someone that says, hey, what are we doing? Like, we got to, look at this from a certain perspective. And so I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what the answer is.
One more thing that I'll bring up as well is I think that maybe part of the discussion when this comes up is not necessarily, hey, we should treat that we should hold an inquiry and attack Biden the same way that Kavanaugh was, but it's saying, why isn't the media also running all of these stories? Why aren't necessarily should conservatives start acting this way, but it's, well, why aren't you hypocrites also running these stories with the same fervor as you did the Kavanaugh stories? I think that's where a lot of the outrage comes from, is not saying we don't think Biden should be treated that way, but why aren't you treating everyone that? If that's how you think this should be, then you should be running Tara Reade's name on the nightly news every night until it's disproved, just like you did with someone.
I'm gonna no, and I agree with you, and I think that's a valid question. The problem is that when you demand the media treat somebody unfairly because somebody else is being treated unfairly, it's still unfair. And can I swear on? Wait, we're live. I can't swear on here, but there's a famous
at least you recognize it.
Yeah, I know. I almost said it again. Thank God for that little red live button there. But it says I don't even know how to clean it up. But basically, it's like I don't think I can clean it up. But it says doing something ironically, you're still doing it. So it's like if you're breaking into a store ironically, like, and you get caught by the police, it's like, no, guys, it was a joke, I was just kidding. And it's like, yeah, but you still stole out of the store, so we're gonna lock you up and throw you in the cop car. Like, you can't just be like, oh, it's ironic, like, haha. And so it's sort of like, that's what worries me, is that, like, so if we're like, hey, you got treated unfairly, we got treated unfairly, so now we're going to treat you unfairly, you're still treating that person unfairly. Even if in some sort of like cosmic way it's justified, you're still treating this person unfairly. And whether you're doing it because they did it first or whatever the reason is, you're still treating that person unfairly. And so that's my question, is where does it end? Because it feels like it doesn't. We just continue going down that path. And that's what worries me.
The Boston Massacre is where it ends or starts, I think.
Okay. All right, before we run out of time, let's talk about North Carolina. What's your opinion on the reopening now that we're in phase 2 here, which is a little better, but not much different than phase 1?
No, in fact, I think it should be brought up that phase 2 is actually not what phase 2 was supposed to be.
Well, it's modest. Remember, he said it's a modest phase 2, so it will not sleep with you on the first date. It is a modest phase 2. I don't know what modest means when he says like, I thought he meant like a moderate phase 2, but like a modest phase 2. I don't get that. But did
you see where I believe it was the state of Wisconsin said that to practice safe social distancing, you should sleep head to foot with your significant other? So that
what does that change? Should it be like butt to butt? Like
no, that way you're not breathing on you're breathing on their feet, I guess.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, like this. Visually.
I thought they were talking about like for some other reason, and I was like, oh man, they're getting kinky over there with the
you know how those Wisconsinites are. They are known for their promiscuity.
They're inside a lot during the winter, so they gotta experiment. So yeah, I don't blame them.
But they've got good beer and cheese curds. So, but as far as North Carolina goes, I think that Roy Cooper has just absolutely demonstrated that he has no idea what he's doing. I feel like we've talked about that here for now almost 4 years. He is just not a leader. He just doesn't seem to really have a plan about anything. He just kind of wings it. The part I loved last week is they came out on Wednesday, said phase 2 is going to roll out on Friday. We're going to let restaurants open at 50%, and named off the other things that were opening up at limited capacity. And instantly the breweries, tap houses, wineries, all these places kind of came out and said, well, we're not a bar, so can we open? And it took them 3 days to figure it out. And that, to me, that just shows like a general incompetence that they didn't. I mean, do they not have someone on staff that could spend an hour and maybe write all this down? It's like they come out and then someone asks them a question, and then they take 2 or 3 days to come back with some sort of answer. And then they open that up. So now my point is, okay, well, if breweries can open and tap rooms can open and restaurants can open, then why can't a bar open? What's the difference? So and for them to call it science-based and evidence-based.
Oh, science, data, fact. It's like, he says that every single time he does a press conference. He's like, business on science, data, fact.
Yeah, no, it's all fun. So I'll get your opinion in a second, but I did want to, I did some stats here, a stat singular, before the show, because there was a lot of negativity and doom and gloom coming into this a couple months ago. And this has been a bad virus, no doubt about it. A lot of people have died. It's still very serious. But I noticed North Carolina's confirmed case rate to mortality rate is 0.03. So that's a lot better. And so I just wanted to point that we were talking 2-3%, at one point based on, kind of looking at early Italy numbers and stuff. So I'm glad that we haven't ended up in a situation where it is as bad as some people feared that it was.
Well, I mean, it also should be noted, and I think this is something that gets lost all the time because and I would say this is on both sides, there's a lot of goalpost moving, is that the original purpose of the lockdown was just to make sure the hospitals didn't get overrun, but it wasn't to stop people from really dying. So, we're at 100,000. And so my argument's been from day one is that I think kind of both sides were off by a factor of 10, and that, some of the people that were downplaying it thought we wouldn't even reach the swine flu level, which was 12,000. Now we're 10 times above that. And then there were people that thought we were going to be at 1 million, and we're, 10% of that. So I do think that, we're ending up in the middle. Like it always happens with political discussions, right? We weren't the far left or the far right. We were somewhere in the middle. And yeah, I mean, that number's probably going to jump as we start to reopen, but it wasn't about keeping everyone safe for X amount of time until we got a vaccine. It was supposed to be about just flattening the curve, which arguably we've done, maybe too well, and that maybe the rate is supposed to be higher, and we're going to find out. And the problem is though, is that I think it's going to be I don't even know how much harder for governments, because what's happening now is that people are so frustrated. They're starting to file lawsuits. We're seeing them filed here in North Carolina, and they're probably going to win. And so now all of a sudden the governors who sort of had this carte blanche with quarantine law are now going to be stifled. And so if we do have another outbreak, like people have said in the fall, good luck trying to get that done, because I just don't feel like the people are going to be as docile, which, by the way, I think is something that people didn't calculate for. I think a lot of leaders thought, yeah, a lot of people may stay home, but a lot of people are just going to be like, forget this. And everyone was amazingly compliant. And I think that now a lot of us are saying, exactly. I think they thought it was going to be like 50% participation instead of like 100%. And so, because even in states like that had no shutdown, like South Dakota, I mean, their economies collapsed. I mean, so if everyone was out still engaging in commerce, why would the economy be down? There'd be a little bit of a downturn because the country's down, but they've taken a hit because they all stayed home too. But now everyone's kind of like, why?
Listen, I've been out a couple of times in the last week now. Had lunch on Saturday, and the outdoor patio area of the restaurant was fairly busy. They had everything distance out at half capacity, and every other table, whatever. It was decently busy. It was a nice day. Inside, there was no one dining. So, I mean, to your point, even with the restrictions lifted, and I think that is what a lot of people who have been concerned about the economy have been trying to say, is that this isn't going to be a shut it down, wait till everything's a little better, open it back up, fire on all cylinders. I think that there are going to be a ton of businesses and industries that could take months to even get back to normal. I think that we could be high single digit unemployment headed into the election. That's not good for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might still be double digit by November too. I mean, we're at 12%, 14% nationwide and climbing, because there's going to be a little bit of a lag there. So yeah, I mean, I think we're not. But what's kind of funny, and you can probably go back and listen to the tape. I always thought, everyone always thought it was kind of this conspiracy theory that this was all about hurting Trump for November. Well, we saw yesterday in Politico that Democrats, what they're worried about is that right when the election is happening, we're going to be getting these Q3 numbers, probably right around there, or Q2, no, Q3. and they're going to be like insane. They're going to be like 21% growth for the third quarter because everything's going to open back up. And it's just, they're going to be insane. Like the stock market's going to be probably doing pretty well. And it's going to seem like, oh my gosh, look how great everything is. And a lot of Democrats are now worried. And I always thought that from day one, that if you look at the timeline of the shutdown, and maybe that's why you can argue some of the Democrat governors are trying to continue the shutdown. But it appears as if a lot of these good numbers that we're going to be seeing, you know, the devastating ones of Q2 are going to be tremendous in Q3. And it's going to be happening like right when the election starts, like right when we're voting. So
do you think Roy Cooper is one of those memes with the two buttons and it's like destroy Trump or destroy my own election? And he doesn't know which button to push.
Well, it's funny because you got like his donors on one shoulder and then you got like his like political advisors that are like telling him, you know, you can't destroy this, you know, the economy. And so, yeah, no, I do think he's in, and now he got the RNC. I think they're pressuring him. I almost feel bad for Roy Cooper because he's not smart and he's being given a lot of different opinions from people that normally are like lock and step. And so I feel kind of bad for him because he's like, he's got to be under a lot of stress to decide who he's going to go with, which it's not like a devil and an angel. It's just two devils. It's like North Carolina Democrats, national Democrats.
And he created it himself. That's the best part.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem when you rely on polling to make every decision. When the polling is like 50-50, you're like, oh, you have to make the decision now. And he's like, I've never done that in my political career. So, yeah.
I did notice another statement of positivity. I read the phase 2 release document on Friday, and it did specifically say that social distancing, the rules do not apply to your First Amendment rights. So I'm glad they cleared that up. They actually spelled that out in there, just in case anyone's wondering.
He's like, hey, you guys aren't going to believe what this U.S. Constitution thing says. Like, can you believe it says freedom of religion? Man, you think I would have read that with being attorney general for 12 years. But
have you guys ever heard of this little thing?
No, I can't make fun of him too much. I did not know that the North Carolina Constitution mentions fruit of your own labor, because I've been talking about that a lot on my radio shows being one of the arguments for the lawsuits. So I'll admit I didn't know that. But then again, I'm not an attorney, nor was I attorney general. So I get a little bit more of a pass than the gov.
A little bit. Well, you know, we're running out of time, and I don't know if there's anything else that you think that we should get to.
No, I think
it's a good update. I feel like it took us 4 weeks to do another show, but that's how slow time is going right now.
Actually, I will say May has moved almost at light speed, in my opinion, versus April. April was like a year. Like May has been quicker. I feel like because maybe we've been out more. But like April was seriously the longest month I've ever experienced.
It was awful. We just went week to week with more speculative numbers. Now we can at least look back and see kind of what's going on. And I love that. I mean, the curve is flat and we've done a good job. And I will say, I am supposed to have an Amazon delivery on Thursday, and hopefully my hair will be gone. So this is going to be the last week of the best hair in radio for you and I.
Oh man, what did you get, a Flowbee?
Yes. No, I'm going to attach it to the shop vac.
Yeah, it's a Flowbee. Is that a Flowbee? Or the Flomi or something, whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I told you to watch your language. We are live. But no, it's you know,
the Flomi was something else. I don't know. The Flomi was I bought from another store.
That is not from Amazon. All right, man. Well, let's try to do it again next week, and we'll be maybe closer to phase 2.1.
Yeah, I like it. All right, man. I'll see you.
See ya.